Afternoon greetings, everyone. Just to make sure that we all receive that warmth, that Durban warmth, and the sense of belonging, I'm gonna greet you the way Durbanites greet. So I would say, Sanbonani nonke ekakasin. Are you guys good? All right, fantastic. So thank you once again, Program Director. And I would also like to greet our distinguished guest. And exclusively, I would also like to greet Cape Media, as well as all the sponsors of this great event. And not lastly, I would like to greet the giants in the house, all the entrepreneurs. You forgive me, Program Director. I'm going to call them entrepreneurs. I know this is an SMME event, but I would like to refer to them as entrepreneurs. I am very excited to be here. I know, some of us or some of you sitting there may not actually realize how great this opportunity is. So part of the reason why I am so excited is because I am in the midst of innovators. I am in the midst of economic growth creators. I'm in the midst of innovators, thought leaders. I'm in the midst of industry disruptors. So for me, that's one thing that excites me a lot as an entrepreneur. And not only that, apart from everything that has been said by previous speakers, the recent speaker actually got me very dread. After all the things that he was saying, I felt like communicating with one of the organizers that I'm not going to be part of this program anymore. Because it seems as though we are going to be on fire very soon after all the things that you are saying, that we're going to get banned when the ozone layer eventually disappears. So, having said that, in the midst of entrepreneurs, I think I don't have to be scared. Like I just mentioned, we've got industry disruptors. So even in terms of that, who knows, we might have someone in our midst that would come up with a solution that would prevent that from happening. Why not? All right, so without any further waste of time, I would like to just do a quick background in terms of what we do at Tendyne Harvest Consulting. Perhaps before I do that, I must say the food was great. And hopefully, no one is going to be sleeping. We're going to be talking procurement, which is a very, complex subject, especially those that have been down that road would know that. It's highly regulated, so all the things that I'm going to be going through, I hope you just bear with me. We're going to be done in just a minute. So, before I start, I would like to see, just by the show of hands, those of you that can safely say, in your business currently, you are tendering or offering your services in a manner which rewards or makes you harvest eventually. Just by the show of hands. Are you harvesting in terms of your service offerings, whatever that you offer, be it a service or a product that you are offering the market? Are you seeing the results of that? Okay, I see a few hands. All right, so I would assume the rest of the hands that were not raised are people that are still in the process. They might have established their businesses, but they're not yet reaping any results, which is specifically why we've been invited here. So Tendyne Harvest, as the name suggests, we are all about making or creating opportunities for SMMEs. So I would say SMMEs because, we've been invited to talk to SMMEs today, but it's all about creating opportunities for businesses out there. So within Tender and Harvest, there's a session that deals specifically with procurement opportunities, be it in public or private sector. So those opportunities would be shared with the interested parties. So I'll just take you through the presentation. Just to give you a quick background, Tender and Harvest was established in 2011. I am, by the way, a supply chain management specialist. I've worked for various corporates in the public sector, specifically within the area of procurement. And also, I have, some experience in public procurement. So I've worked with public entities as well as private enterprises, specifically in that area. So I've been fortunate enough to be exposed to the processes and the ways in which different businesses would basically, be taken through that process, offering their services, submitting various proposals through requests for quotations, requests for proposals, and what have you, right? So, having said that, there's a lot that I've realized in that process. Sitting in tender evaluation committees, having to go through the submissions that get submitted by various companies in response to requests for proposals or requests for quotations. And often than not, what I've picked up is that it's the little things that would eventually disqualify a small business from getting an opportunity, a particular opportunity. Administrative type of, mistakes, compliance issues, being given a document to sort of complete and attach all the relevant supporting documents. And you'd find that people would fail to adhere to just simple rules, be it a tax clearance matter or your registration certificate for your business. You'd find that people just, complete without paying that particular, attention to detail to make sure that everything that is submitted is according to the requirements as set out in that particular process, right? So, having said that, I hope I don't want to sound like I'm preaching, so I'm going to be going through a lot of compliance stuff, taking you through the tendering process, specifically in the public sector, right? So, please do forgive me again, Program Director. I'm going to be very disruptful, but hopefully it doesn't get to a stage where it messes up the program. All right, so now if we could just go to the next page, please, or the next slide. All right, so I've already mentioned that the company Tender and Harvest Consulting was established in 2011 through the experience that I've just shared with you, having seen the challenges that SMMEs would experience in the process of tendering or the procurement process, right? So I'm not going to say anything about myself. I think we all have the program in front of us. So in terms of the vision of the business, it's all about growing African business to their boundless potential. That's my passion. That's the passion of the company, and the team within Tender and Harvest always strive to work towards that, right? So we are passionate about small businesses, small African businesses, and our mission in terms of how we intend on responding to that would be basically through unleashing business growth through our value add or supply chain management or procurement consulting services, right? So I'll just share with you shortly what do we mean by that in terms of the opportunities that would be available through the procurement system. All right. Now, if you could just go to the next slide. So I'm going to be talking to you about the public procurement system. I'm not sure how many of you know this, that within the public space, in terms of procurement opportunities, I know some of us normally construe this concept. They think supply chain management and procurement, is one and the same thing. Procurement is just an element within the supply chain. Supply chain within any organization or within any market, maybe to be more broad. Like in this atmosphere, we've got various SMMEs. So within your business, you've got the marketing element, the business administration, finance, you name it, right? And you've got your business development leg where you do your engagements. Some of us are involved in the production process. So supply chain management basically looks at the entire value chain in terms of the movement of goods and services until the end point where they reach the hands of the consumer, right? So I'm only going to be talking to procurement. If you could just move on. Oh, sorry. I've got the gadget here. I didn't even realize that. All right. So in terms of the public procurement system, how it essentially works is that you'll have your verbal quotations. So some of you are already in that process. You would know this. You'd get a call, say from Eskom, Transnet, or even the private sector. They would ask you, how much your services are or how much your product is, right? So in terms of that process, it only requires you to just say or quote your price over the phone, right? And obviously, if you are successful, then the company will then send you an official communication for you to confirm your price that you had quoted over the phone, right? So that's what they call the verbal quotation. Moving right along, so in terms of the written quotations, we've got what is called the 3 quotes system within the public sector supply chain management system. So in terms of the regulations, National Treasury says that any public entity, so be it a municipality or a government department or a state-owned company, they are required to get or obtain 3 written quotations if the spend of that particular service is up to 30,000. So anything above 10,000 to 30,000, you would have your written price quotation. So how it works is that, again, you'd get an email or you still get a call, and then you are asked to submit a quotation for that particular service that they're looking for, right? So as you would know, any entity, be it in the public space or private space, they've got operational requirements. So what it means is that in terms of the supply chain management system, through the procurement processes, they would then issue a request for proposal or a request for quote, depending on the procurement strategy that particular organization opts to follow. And again, depending on the threshold value or the spend of that particular project, right? So now in terms of those 3 quotations, once the quotations have been received, so they'll be taken through the evaluation process. I'm not going to go through the nitty-gritties of that. I'm just highlighting the most important things. So they'll go through the evaluation process. So if you are successful, then you'd be awarded the order. But I think in terms of opportunities, most of the opportunities are within this space in terms of the written price quotations, your formal quotations, and of course, your tender processes. So these now are big type of projects where the nature of the services or the products that are being requested is highly complex in terms of value, in terms of the type of services that comes with that. Okay, so moving right along, your formal quotation now will then be what is called, or what is normally done through a formal procurement process where the company now no longer sends you an email or give you a call, so they would advertise, right? They would advertise that particular opportunity to say that we're looking for service providers or suppliers to do this type of work, right? So that would be advertised normally within 7 days. So again, that's the regulation from National Treasury to say anything that is up to the tune of 500,000, right? Inclusive of VAT, that would be advertised on your print media, right? So the entity would then decide in terms of whether to advertise that on their website, as well as the newspapers and also other procurement portals. So currently, since 2015, we've got what is called the e-tendering. Essentially, the e-tendering is a platform where all government entities, your department, municipalities, and state-owned companies would then go and advertise all procurement opportunities, right? So within that platform, that's where you would see any, request for quotation up to the value of 500,000 and beyond, right? So again, in terms of tender and harvest, what we do, the SMMEs, they don't really know these things. So we have to basically create an awareness. So if you're part of our client base, we'll then advocate on your behalf. So in terms of the entire procurement process, how it works is that if, just to give you an example, say there's an opportunity in Richards Bay. Maybe some of the state-owned companies that side, they're looking for services of an engineering consultant, for an example, right? So in terms of the e-tendering system, it does not necessarily mean that you'll be able to submit pretty much everything that is required in response to that request. All it means is that you'll be able to access the opportunity, but in terms of the actual process of having to collect the document, submit it, and attend all these compulsory briefing meetings, you'll have to actually go there, pick up the document, you come back, you complete it, you submit it, and if there's a compulsory briefing meeting, you have to be there in that meeting, because if you don't attend that meeting, then they'll disqualify you straight away, right? So that's how, for the lack of a better word, I would say the public procurement system works. It's so harsh for SMMEs in that, in terms of resources, can you imagine someone who's based in Durban? Such an opportunity comes up, it's in Cape Town, they fit the criteria, looking at all the requirements, everything, they can do the job. But now, in terms of the process, the procurement process, the way it is, it's sort of, exclude someone who's not at that level in terms of resources, because now you'll have to travel, you go to Cape Town, you pick up the document, and those documents are also not free of charge, right? You have to pay for the document. So some, they will charge you 500, it's a printing cost basically. So you've traveled all the way, pay that minimum fee for the document, you come back to complete it. It's such a rigorous process. Once all of that is done, you submit it back. So can you imagine in terms of the cost element of that, or rather the financial implication for an SMME, having to drive all the way, come back, complete the document, attach all the necessary documents. Some of them, they have to be original. That's why you cannot email or fax the document. So the process is designed that way. Now, if it's something that also requires over and above your submission that you are part of the clarification meeting or the tender briefing meeting. Now, it means that you have to collect the document, come back to complete it, then you go for the compulsory briefing meeting, which is always before the closing date, right? So before you submit. So in that meeting, that's where they provide clarification. So if you've got any questions that you need to ask about that particular tender, when it comes to be it specifications or whatever it is, administrative sort of questions, that's where you get an opportunity to ask such questions and get the response straight away, right? So, in terms of that whole process, I've just painted a picture of what it takes for an SMME to actually submit their proposal to bid for that particular work. So, in terms of these opportunities, in as much they are out there, it's really difficult for the SMMEs to actually, get hold of those opportunities and be able to respond and sort of get to a level where they can be taken through the evaluation process and eventually, if they are successful, get awarded the projects, right? So, on my next slide, it basically talks about that entire process, the competitive bid process, where, as an SMME again, though you might meet all the requirements, remember this is an open tender system. So even the big corporates or your big type of consultants, so in that previous example when I was talking about engineering consulting type of services, you can think of guys like, your Royal Haskoning, your EOH, you name them, right? So those are giants, business leaders within, their sphere. So if you find yourself within that particular market, it then becomes tough for you. Because now you're competing with these giants. The process is also difficult. You come across an opportunity, and then you realize that, what, I can actually do this, but in terms of getting to a point where I can submit my proposal, it's going to take a lot of time and resources away from me before I can actually submit it, right? So most SMMEs would then get discouraged by that. So I would share with you towards the end of the presentation how then Tender and Harvest is assisting SMMEs to better position themselves and access these opportunities as a way of having that additional revenue stream over and above what you are offering within your service offerings, right? And by the way, perhaps before I move on to the next slide, I'm going to say something that's not going to sound good for those of you that are reliant on these opportunities. If you call yourself an entrepreneur and you solely rely on tender opportunities, I would really caution you and recommend that you start looking at other ways of making an income. Because like I said, it's not an easy game. The process is so discouraging. There are opportunities for everyone, right? But just to give an example, you might find yourself having submitted, like, say, 20 proposals, and out of that 20, you only get one, or sometimes you don't get, not even, nothing. So, if you think about it, in terms of all the resources that you might have utilized throughout that process, all the traveling cost, the printing of documents, going back and forth, attending these briefing meetings, it could be massive. And that's just one thing that discourages people. So it's something that we always recommend, that it needs to be an additional revenue stream, so that you don't find yourself between a rock and a hard place where you have to really shut down your operations or close business just because you're not getting any work, right? So, having said that, now I think in terms of the evaluation process, I'm not going to dwell much into that, but pretty much what would happen throughout the evaluation process, depending on the procurement strategy, the evaluation would be done. And if it was a tender process, so if they had asked for a request for proposals and things like that, a fully fledged supply chain management process will have to be followed, whereby that particular proposals, all the companies that submitted would be taken through evaluation process, where they'll be scrutinized in terms of technical requirements, if they meet the specifications and what have you, right? So in terms of that, there's various systems linked to whatever procurement strategy the entity might have decided to pursue. So there's what they call the two-stage evaluation process, where basically the company will be evaluated firstly on your technical requirements. So just to give an example again, referring to construction type of services, so they might ask for the proof of equipment that you use in terms of executing your projects. They might ask for key personnel that would be directly involved in that particular project. So you have to present that as part of your proposal. So you'll be evaluated on that, right? So that's what they call the functionality evaluation or technical evaluation. Of course, it's not to say that all tenders go through the same type of evaluation. Some of the evaluation systems would just be based on price and preference meaning your triple BE points, right? In terms of your BE status level of the company. All right, and there's what they call the two-stage bidding process, where basically if the company or the entity is not 100% sure in terms of the specifications and how the market is going to respond to that particular request for proposal, then they would follow that strategy of the two envelope system, where basically you'll have to submit your technical proposal as well as your financial proposals. So it's done in a manner that would basically mean when they're evaluating, they will firstly have to open your technical proposal. And then whoever meets the requirements, so if they're happy with your proposal in terms of the technicality of the project, then they would shortlist you, and only the companies that would be screened through that process or that would be successful in that process will then get a chance of having their financial proposals opened. So pretty much the technical proposal is only talking about how you're going to execute this particular project, right? Without having to mention anything that has to do with the cost implications thereof, right? So that would be your your envelope system. Now, in terms of pre-qualifications, again, not all the time companies would be invited to respond to any particular project requirement. At times, the organization might just want to establish a database of suppliers for that particular category as per the procurement plan. So a procurement plan would guide them in terms of what type of projects they're going to execute, or they're going to be going out on tender for within that particular financial period, right? So based on that, then the organization would go back and check on its supplier database if they've got adequate number of suppliers or service providers to respond to that particular request. So if they feel that there's no suppliers or the number is limited, then they would then go this route of having to advertise. Then the companies would respond to say, here we are, we can help you with these services or with these goods that you might be requiring in the future. And then you get shortlisted, you get an opportunity to be within their database so that in future when there's opportunities, you are able to respond to such opportunities, right? For the sake of time, I'm not going to go into the negotiations part. I think that would be self-explanatory. It's all part and parcel of the evaluation process, right at the end where they would sit down with whoever is awarded the tender to negotiate the offer, the tendered offer, basically your financial proposal, right? So those of you that have been in this process, you might be familiar with all these documents. These are basically, just before that, I think my mind is going ahead of me. Before the tender documents, there's what they call the local content production. So in terms of procurement, what government has done through Department of Trade and Industry, they've said, again, just to protect the SMMEs, or should I say, the local economy, right? What they've done, they've created within the supply chain management system what is called the local content production, which gets incorporated into the procurement process, whereby if an organization is requiring services in that particular area or a product that falls within this category, then they would say 30% of that entire project needs to be reserved for a local small business, right? Just so that the SMMEs also get a fair chance in terms of getting to be part of the procurement opportunities. So, just to give you an example again, if it's services, say consulting services, engineering consulting, whatever it is that they're looking for, anything that would be done through the tender process, then they would say whoever is awarded needs to reserve that portion, 30%. So now they need to go back and identify a small business that they're going to take along, groom the business. So it's all intended to reserve opportunities, tender opportunities for small businesses, but over and above that, it's also meant to grow those small businesses to an extent where they are also able to compete with these big businesses that have been there, getting all these opportunities previously. So essentially, it's intended for that, but what is happening currently, you find that there's a lot of these companies that would come, they just take the SMME just for the sake of compliance, and they're not actually transferring the skills or grooming them to a point where they can actually stand on their own and be able to compete with them. So in terms of what we do again within that space, we make sure that SMMEs firstly are able to get those opportunities, because remember, the entity would not say to say, for instance, group 5. They would not say, go and find the SMME that is maybe based in Guamashu by the name of, so and so. All they would say is, you need to go and find someone that you're going to work with. These are the requirements. The company needs to be a local-based company, a small company, doing the same type of services that you're doing or supplying the same type of products that you're supplying and work with that company. So we need 1, 2, and 3 in terms of compliance, right? So in terms of that, the awarded company will then exercise its discretion in most cases. So they'll just go and find whoever they want to work with, right? And at times, they won't be able to find those companies due to the nature of the services or the products that they're offering. So what Tendyne Harvest does through our partnerships with the public and private sector, we are then able, if you are within our client base, we are then able to link your company up with such opportunities so that you can be able to also participate in that process and get those opportunities. And without having to dwell much on that, I think everyone can see. So these are the categories. So you'd find that in terms of, you know, supply type of opportunities, be it chemicals or anything that needs to be supplied, a physical commodity, you'd find that the big companies export and import a lot of those commodities. So what government is also saying is that, you know, within all these categories, each and every company that would get an opportunity, they need to start investing in our local economy to make sure that, you know, in terms of our local investments for economic growth purposes, we do not find ourselves in a situation where we are importing pretty much everything that we utilize within the system, right? So, moving right along, I think I've spoken in length about the public sector tender process. So in terms of the evaluation system, again, I did say that it goes through a rigorous process. It's highly, highly regulated. So there's a lot of prescripts that one has to, you know, abide by. And the regulations like your Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act, which is the one that basically guides the process when it comes to public procurement opportunities. So all state-owned entities have to abide by these regulations. However, if you're an SMME and you are not familiar with this, you'd find yourself in a situation where you get exploited or you are discriminated simply on things like, you know, administrative type of issues. So again, in terms of the regulations, you know, the public, or should I say, in this instance, the SMMEs specifically, they are not educated, you know, in terms of these things, where they would know exactly in terms of the regulations, how are they supposed to offer their services, and within what parameters can they challenge if there's a decision that they feel was unfair in terms of the evaluation, how could they best challenge that particular decision? So Tendyne Harvest would then come in to advocate for businesses in that instance, right? So there's what they call within the system, the bid specification committee, right? I hope no one is sleeping. This is more prescriptive. It's going to be regulations and the entire procurement process. So within a public procurement process, before they advertise that particular requirement or that particular opportunity, it will have to go through the stages. So the BSC, or the Bid Specification Committee, will be basically a committee or a team that would put together specifications. So normally you'd find that, you know, depending on the nature of the project, it could be engineers together with supply chain management, as well as one representative from finance and legal, just to make sure that all the aspects of the projects are covered. Once the tender has been advertised, it comes back for evaluation, then it would go through this committee, the bid evaluation committee, where they would now evaluate you on technical, on the technical aspect, as well as your financial proposal, right? And then lastly, the bid adjudication committee is the one that will then make an award, right? So all these committees, they've got assigned task, or what they call the terms of reference. So it's only this committee that would make an award, where it could be the CEO. Within the regulations, they just call them the accounting officers. So that simply means the CEO of the company or the head of department for that particular company will then be the one to sign off the award, right? So here you find that after that entire process, you will then be sent regret letters or award letter if you were fortunate enough to meet all the requirements. After which, then it goes back to all the legalities that I was saying. So it does not necessarily mean that everyone that is disqualified has been fairly disqualified. So the regulation, as per National Treasury regulations pertaining to supply chain management processes, it specifically states that you cannot discriminate or, exclude a supplier or a service provider based on administrative type of errors, right? So you still find that within the process, there are a lot of organizations that would penalize SMMEs just for, small mistakes. So you are then able, if you are well informed, or if you work with a supply chain consulting firm like Tendyne Harvest, then you are able to best challenge those decisions. And if you've got, evidence to present to the appeals committee or whatever structure, then you'll be able to get that opportunity if you were unfairly excluded. Right, so having said that, that was all about the public sector tender opportunities. So one might be asking a question, sitting down there, you're asking, so what happens if there's opportunities in the private sector? How do I get involved, right? A simple answer to that question would be, like I said, I've been down that road. I've seen these things happen. So in a private sector environment, unfortunately, in terms of transformation, there's a lot that still needs to be done. Private sector procurement is a different ball game altogether. There's no legislations, in terms of compliance and what have you. They stick to their policies, and the policies are not the same across companies, right? So, for instance, Unilever, there's a lot of supply chain or procurement opportunities there, just to name a few, Rainbow, but in terms of how do you really get to be part of, those opportunities, it remains a question that is unanswered. So you have to physically go there and ask if they will be able to consider you for your services. It's not the same way as the public sector where the opportunities are open to the general public to respond to, right? So again, within that space, Tender and Harvest has a portal of tender opportunities where basically what we do in terms of public and private sector, we sort of consolidate all those notifications as and when they come. So if your company specializes in construction, then you would say, okay, you know what, I'm only interested on construction type of projects. And then you would only get requests that are in line with that category as per your selection. So in terms of private sector, like I said, in terms of access, it's very hard to access those opportunities. So we provide that opportunities, those type of opportunities to SMMEs to also get to participate in that process. Right. So I think for the sake of time, I've covered pretty much everything in terms of the entire tendering process. So again, on the administrative type of the evaluation side of the entire supply chain management process, you'd find things like the tax clearance certificate, your SBD, which is the standard bid documents, which are always incorporated within the documents. These need to be completed, duly completed and signed. So if they need a stamp, they need a stamp. If it has to be signed, it has to be signed. You can get disqualified if you didn't comply with those requirements. Then I've spoken about functionality requirements. Insurance matters, obviously, depending on the nature of the project. A construction project, you can imagine, in terms of public liability insurance, you would need a cover before you can execute that particular project. So it varies. It depends on what it is that you're going to be doing. Right, so again, this talks to all the SARS requirements. So in terms of the evaluation stages, so pretty much these would be the stages. So you'll be evaluated on your price, your technical ability, which is what I mentioned earlier, which is what they call functionality evaluation. And then lastly, your preference, which is your triple BE, right? Rejection criteria, I think that's self-explanatory. With the permission of Bev, or whoever is going to be running with that, we'll share the presentation. I think the rest of the stuff there is really self-explanatory. So, just lastly, before I close, so these would be our services. So what we provide, like I said, it's tender administration and logistics support services. It's all in the spirit of helping entrepreneurs to maximize their revenue potential, right? So instead of having to run around chasing tenders, which is what I really discourage, you should be focusing on your core business. It's really painful to see SMMEs running around collecting documents, wasting their time instead of doing business development type of engagements. You should be going out there, to approach corporates and the public sector in terms of trying to get them to buy your services, as opposed to chasing these tenders, because that comes with a cost. So can you imagine if you're doing that? Now you are in a position where you're busy with the traveling. Just one day, having to go and pick up a tender document. I don't care. You might be within the Tegwini district municipality, right? Going to pick up a tender document, come back, complete it, submit, attend the briefing meeting. It takes a lot of time. So we take care of that, and you get to focus on your business, on the core functions. So over and above that, we are really passionate about SMMEs. So Tender and Harvest is part of a group, the TNH group. So we just a division within TNH group. TNH group basically facilitates, they provide opportunities, access to market opportunities. We also have an SMME hub where businesses would come together, or SMMEs would come together and share office space. Because that's one of the things that we've realized, that in terms of SMMEs, some of them, they're operating their businesses in the boot. Those are the realities of the game. Some of them, they're operating from their houses, and it's really painful when you have to go through a process that requires your business to project that image of being a professional, well-established business if you don't have an office. So we also provide that platform. Another issue would be the staffing requirements. You'd find that as a founder of the business, you are doing pretty much everything from finance to marketing, HR, So again, TNH Group provides the SMMEs with that opportunity where you'll be given, we work with graduates, who are professionally trained to basically assist you in terms of your administration side of the business, right? So these are people that would be looking for experience, and not only that, in terms of, you know, the financial implications, it also depends if that particular cohort has been, you know, funded to assist SMMEs in terms of those services. So we also do have instances where you'd get SMMEs, maybe, you know, a group, say 10 or 20, they have, like, call it free labor, but if you think of it, these people would be getting experience, but at the same time, they are also helping your business grow. So, again, as they would say in terms of the statistics, SMMEs have an excess of over 80%. I stand to be corrected in terms of the economy, specifically within South Africa. So what that means basically is that in terms of opportunities, there are a lot of opportunities out there. We need innovators, we need people that will be creative to come up with opportunities and be able to create employment, and not only that, grow our economy to a level where it can compete with first world economies, right? So with that being said, I would like to close and take any questions, if there are any questions. And Program Director, like I said, I would really apologize. I think in terms of my presentation, I had to go through a lot of things. Hopefully it was an informative session. So if there are any questions.